Well, look, I think Dutch was quite unique. He certainly has a unique spot in the Australian blues scene, and particularly for Melbourne people, Melbourne blues artists, because, in my experience, I was learning to play blues. I'm self-taught, but I was listening to all these old records, and I was particularly focused on the roots of the music. So, unlike a lot of people that discover blues from listening to people like Cream or Hendrix and going backwards to find the roots of the music, just as it turned out, the first blues I ever heard was the very early stuff. So 20s, 30s, 40s style blues, and a lot of acoustic finger-picking stuff. And there was something very profoundly inspiring, having fallen in love with this music, and you hear it on old vinyl records, but you don't actually see a live musician playing it. So when I saw Dutch, and he was playing a lot of solo acoustic gigs in coffee shops and front bars of pubs. Later on he had bands and played electric as well, but for me, his acoustic stuff, his finger picking was really exciting, because it was the first time I actually saw a live musician playing that stuff. And he particularly played a lot of Big Bill Broonzy stuff in his repertoire, and he did it to a T, great guitarist, great vocalist, and a bit of a rascal, so, he could really sell the music, which was wonderful. It was wonderful to have that experience of someone playing that stuff. And, but, when everybody talks about Dutch now, of course he has an incredibly important role in the Melbourne scene and in the Australian blues scene, but I think it's probably a misconception that he was completely idiosyncratically one out of the box, because I see Dutch very much as being in the Big Bill Broonzy tradition and being very much part of a wider blues tradition. He was a very good example of it. And if there was anything that was particularly individual about him, is I think everybody has a template of this kind of style of blues, and we're all going for it. I play like, and maybe someone who's a glorious finger picker like Nick Charles plays things, but everybody's fingers move slightly differently, and everybody has a slightly different way of inflecting the music and their own sense of timing or syncopation. And I think that's where Dutch's version of this style of music was quite particular. He had a particular way of syncopating things, which is very difficult to emulate. But what he was actually doing is very much part of the very basic stuff of the blues tradition. Support there. I found, by and large, that the guys, the players, were very supportive. I had a lot of guys in the blues scene, Dutch included, were very supportive. And I said, Dutch could be crusty, and I would see him sometimes people would sit in with him and his band, and he would do things to tangle them up. He would just like play things, or these ragtime progressions can be a little bit of a minefield for people who are used to straight 12-bar blues, and he would play this stuff, and you could see people getting flustered, and he was almost had a roguish delight in tripping people up, And it took a long time before he invited me to sit in with him, and when he did, the first time I got to play with Dutch, he played Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out, which is a different progression. It's a particular progression. It's got a few different chords in it. And he played it in E flat, which is not generally considered a particularly guitar-friendly key. And he had all this fancy finger picking. But it was because I think he was like, okay, step up. And I stepped up, and I played, and he was pleased. It was almost like he did that to see, it's been years coming, girl, but let's see you do it, and it was great, and it was a beautiful moment, and I think that sort of, that is part of what I was saying earlier about the idea of the blues mentor or the influence, and you got to earn your stripes, you got to grow up in public, you have to have a go.